The company I have is Scalability. Yeah, part of what we'll be talking about is scaling. Some of it will be about the topic that you saw, not your father's accountant. A bit of a misnomer. I think the reality is we'll end up talking a little bit about when you're creating your startup and you're getting off the ground, the do's, the don'ts, things to help be prepared, keep from stepping on any landmines and sort of getting yourself into trouble, and sort of tips, tools, resources that you can use in order to just make it's hard enough as it is to make a startup successful. So a few of these will help you eliminate the obvious ones that are going to get in the way and the friction. It looks like we've got about 25-ish people, something like that, rough guess. Maybe more will come in. It's hard when you do these because you want to get a bit of a gauge of the demographic of the people listening for you guys. And so just raise your hands for me if you are a student at Ryerson. Is everybody here a student at Ryerson? So just about everybody. Does anybody also have a startup already operated? Okay, so we got about 10. Is anybody part of the DMZ right now? You're part of the DMZ? 2 people? TMZ? Yeah. Oh, okay. And you're? Biomedical. Okay, awesome. All right, and is anybody sort of revenue positive now? Is everybody actually making money yet? Yeah? What kind of company is it you got?
We develop and deliver live science experiences. It's weird, but it's fun.
It's weird but fun, but it's making money.
Yep.
Oh, that's cool. And you got a lot of employees already, or any, or?
We've got a couple, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've got around 4 that work with me fairly regularly, and a team of others who help out peripherally.
Good. You guys taking any external funding at all?
Not yet, no.
No? Something you're interested in?
That would be cool.
Yeah.
That would be nice.
Yeah. Okay, well then feel free to jump in as I'm going through this. It's always good to get feedback from all the different people. So I think you're in the minority, I would think, then. It doesn't seem like it. There's a few other people, yourself too. So yeah, feel free to contribute from that perspective. But the rest of you, a lot of this will be tailored more directly to people thinking about getting into it, the things that you need to think about, but there's also things for the guys that have already got operations up and running. I want it to be as open. There's a slide at the end that says Q&A, but if we don't have any questions or conversation before we get to the end, I'll be a bit disappointed. Like, let's try to open it up. I mean, the presentation will go pretty quickly if there's no back and forth. If we stop and drill in on a couple of areas, I think it'll be more effective. So yeah, I'm a CPA, CA by trade. I grew up in Toronto. I went out to Winnipeg as a student, and I ended up doing my CA there. I spent some time in the Cayman Islands, almost about 6 years working there as a CA. Then I ended up in the back office of a company called Goldman Sachs, doing that for almost 10 years. I left there, and I did that about 5 years here in Toronto for Goldman Sachs. Back office administration is a lot like, it's a lot of accounting, it's a lot of reporting to shareholders. It's basically taking people's investments on a monthly basis and turning it into a performance report, balance sheet, income statement, et cetera, so that people can buy in and redeem on those investments on a monthly basis. So you have to be very accurate. You've got to deal with investors. You've got to deal with investment managers. And since it was at Goldman Sachs, there's a lot of high-profile companies that you're dealing with. So you've got to be right. You've got to be correct. That 10 years sort of prepared me for this back office experience, and it was all hedge funds. And hedge funds have a lot of money. They've got not very complicated back offices. And I was thinking that I would retire there. I was thinking I'd work there for the rest of my life, and that'd be that simple. While I was there, I got a call from a guy named Kirk Simpson at Wave Accounting. We met and we talked for about 6 months about me joining a startup called Wave Accounting. Has anybody ever heard of Wave Apps, a Toronto startup? It used to be called Wave Accounting. So I went there when there was probably about 15 people. We scaled up over a couple of years, up to about 100 people. Fantastic ride with some great investors, Silicon Valley investors who pressed us and pushed us on every 2 months. We reported to them. really pushed us to get up the learning curve quickly, and it was a fantastic experience. Unfortunately, we scaled down at one point. I ultimately left, but I mean, that experience for me was what opened my eyes to what was actually out there in terms of online, cloud, SaaS world, and what I could do to change this traditional back office that I had learned at Goldman Sachs, and actually do the same thing for small businesses and startups. And that's where I really got excited. And that's how I ended up ultimately meeting the original owner of the company called Scalability. His name is Raymond Luck. And I ended up buying the company from him just about a year ago. So now I'm in the same boat where a lot of you guys are going, is that I would still consider it a startup. At this point, we have about 10 staff. About half of them are employees, half of them are contractors. But it's been the same thing on a monthly basis. I'm focusing on cash flow. I'm focusing on my own operations. I'm trying to scale. I'm trying to be compliant with tax rules. We've got customers across Canada, so I'm dealing with different provincial sales tax, et cetera. All the different things that you guys are going to have to deal with. So I feel like that mix of background and experience leads me to be able to have this kind of conversation and project some of my experiences. At the moment, I also spend a significant amount of time working with the DMZ. I'm the in-house bookkeeper there for a lot of the DMZ companies. I'm often there at least once, twice a week, just open door policy for DMZ members to come in and sort of have the same type of conversation that we're having today. What can they do? How can I help them? What are they doing wrong, et cetera? So the agenda for the presentation, again, it's not it's hopefully dynamic. Give you a little bit of background, which I just did. Let's set some expectations in terms of what the startup world's going to look like for you guys and where it's going, on an overall sort of grand scale where I think it's going. We'll look at some stats, the types of business structures that you should think about when you are starting up a company, the importance of business plans. I'll touch lightly on this area. It's not my strength to be giving people too much advice on that. I'm always a little bit too ad hoc in my own business planning. I sort of jump in. Cash flow and financing I can help with. Staffing, some things that you can look to do from staffing perspective. Taxes, of course, which is really important for you guys. And then we'll get into this, why the father's accountant comment was a bit of a misnomer on this lecture, but there is an important aspect at the end of it that I'd like to share with you guys, that if it sinks in and you do attack it right at the start of your venture, I think it'll really help really set you up for success as long as the model itself is there. And then, if there is any additional Q&A, then we can address that. Just quick disclaimers. Parts of this presentation were created by CPA Canada, and they've given us the permission to use it and repurpose it because they want the information out there. And then this is just some of the references. I figured I'd put this at the start instead of the end. Otherwise, we'd never even look at it. So that out of the way. So I quickly talked about who I was and how I got here. Again, that's just a quick reminder. Here's some of the clients that I deal with now. I've got about 50 clients in my portfolio at the moment. These are just some of them that you might recognize. There's probably some more from the DMZ that you would recognize. But I deal primarily with startups and primarily with SaaS companies. My model of business works better with that. Service-based software producers like TWG. These types of companies really, I think, fit with my personality and the model of my type of service. But I've also got some more traditional ones like Consumer Choice and Cognition. All right, so to start off, expectation management. Anybody want to be brave enough to just share an idea of what's your startup like? What's your name?
My name is Anthony.
Anthony? Yeah, you don't mind if I pick on you a bit today, do you?
By all means.
What's it like? Do you guys have an office?
We're based out of the Transmedia Zone, so
Yeah.
we're just down the road at Ryerson.
Shared space?
Yeah.
Cool. Yep. And pretty flexible hours,
Yeah, it's very flexible. of the nature of the work, we work, we work sporadically. We tend to work most during the summer and during March break and
Yep.
things like that. But,
Yep.
yeah, so it's flexible hours.
Absolutely. So I think that wouldn't be as much of a stereotype of young startups. It is reality in a lot of ways. You said it's kind of, what'd you say about your business? It's kind of weird or funky? You said something?
I don't think a lot of people know about, like, it doesn't fit with traditional models of startups or things you might imagine for startups.
Yeah.
It's not a service that I know
Yeah.
a lot of people do.
And I bet you, I don't know, 70% of the startups that are starting up these days are like that, right? Like and that's why they're startups, because they're coming up with ideas, they're innovating, doing something different. And I think that tends to draw people that are a little bit different, right? At least a little bit different than my generation. I think they're probably actually the majority now of whether it's called millennials or the younger generation. But, sometimes I do some of these presentations for people where the average age is 45 to 55, a lot of older accountants and older back office people. And this type of demonstration really resonates with them in terms of what the stereotypes are out there for startups and then maybe what some of the realities are. So give me a second to queue up this little video for you. Some of you may have already seen this before.
Excited to meet a few good engineers to join the Piper team.
So why don't you tell us a little about yourself?
I work before noon or after 2 p.m. And I need to bring my dog to work. Are you dog friendly? That's not what I asked. Are you dog friendly?
Nice pool. Can my dog go in?
Yeah, we're very dog friendly.
Is there a lifeguard? Because my dog can't swim.
No, it says here on your resume that from 2010 to 2011, you crushed it.
But that's actually an old resume. It should also read that I crushed it from 2013 to present.
So are we to understand that you did not crush it in 2012?
There was a medical situation preventing me from crushing it to my usual standards, so I had to take some time off until I was able to crush it at 100%, at which point I'm soon crushing it full time.
So, it says here that you're proficient in C++, code assembly for multiple processor architectures, and that you are a cyborg?
That is correct. Short for cybernetic organism. I came into this world of filth and pain with a congenital heart condition, requiring the installation of a pacemaker, upon which I am mortally dependent.
Wow, he's technically a cyborg.
Yeah, it makes the resume accurate.
Look, we all know that I can make a shitload more money working for some multicolored happy town in a hermetically sealed box. But permission to be honest.
Permission granted.
Granted.
I like that you guys are so weird.
So obviously stereotypical and exaggerated, but I think it takes a bit of a unique person, a bold person to go onto this adventure that all of you guys are thinking about taking. And it's not easy. It's tough, but maybe a little bit more realistic. Has anybody heard of WeWork before? Gigantic startup now, shared space, worth probably, I think, maybe $30 billion now. Just doing the same thing really that all the different shared spaces are doing here, but branding it and creating a collaborative workspace. I think this gives a little bit better of an indication of what it's like to be in a space where people are innovating all the time, they're working together, they're looking for solutions. I'll play it from there.
I've met a lot of really, really talented people here. There's an atmosphere of kind of creativity and there's free beer.
Friday night, I was here late. We closed the biggest deal in our company history. Went upstairs and they were playing ping pong, beer pong at 6:30. Grabbed the beers, pizza showed up, and it just makes it great to come to work every day.
There's a lot of community here. It's an aspirational place where you're going to meet people unless you're trying not to.
Through working in co-working spaces is how last year we ended up getting introduced to a launch festival, which then introduced us to venture, which then introduced to a large client, and there's this cascade effect. And the reason it happened is because you're in the room talking to the person sitting across you.
I like working out of WeWork. I think it's a great space. You get to have exposure to people and collaborate with people. I guess in an increasingly disconnected world, you know. So it just feels it's just perfect.
I've been at WeWork going on 3 years now, and of course I have a lot of members that I'm very close friends with.
You know, one of the great things about working at WeWork is that they allow you to have a team spread out across the United States while still being able to provide really great resources and facilities, and being able to collaborate and still provide a great service even though we're 2,500 miles away. So I left my full-time job and actually started my own business, and that would not have been possible at all if it wasn't for the fact that Elance provides that great solution.
We're headquartered here in Boston, and we spend about a week of our month in San Francisco in the 2nd Street office. And that's one of the great things about WeWork for me, is that we have both office locations. So it's like we're headquartered in both places. We use Elance for almost everything, from hiring a blog writer to SEO help to corporate presentations to technical help to specific project. Elance always comes to mind.
On Odesk, I could see developers from all countries. We got bids from Ukraine, from Russia, from India, from the US, and everybody was competing at the same, in the same way at the price point.
I just put out projects as often as I can, and they get them done before I can even write up a new project. It's just me and a bunch of Elance guys right now.
I actually use Odesk about 200 hours a month. We don't have a very big budget. We work very leanly, and we have very few people who are dedicated full-time to this. And there's no way we would be able to do that without Odesk, like literally no way.
I need to work much more efficiently. I need to work with, my team. I can't just do it all by myself.
Odesk provides a lot of information, A, about the person, B, they provide a portfolio.
We had enough people on the platform where we knew this could become a big business, and in addition, continuing to run as the 3 founding team wasn't going to be efficient for us to get to where we wanted to be.
I've done a total of like 76 projects on Elance over the past 3 years. I've worked with over 25 different freelancers, many of them repeat.
So I want to see this get it out of money.
So I'm just going to turn that off because I think you get the point. I think the reality is that where you're seeing this shared economy, shared space, outsourced service providers. They're talking about being lean. They're talking about constantly being connected. They're talking about being able to meet teams anywhere in the world, and that really is, the essence of what's happening out there from what I'm seeing. And so when you're setting up your business, and you'll see some repetition as I go through the presentation that hits on this theme. And how you're setting up your business to be consistent with that trend. So just some stats, startups defined as a business and an operation for 3 years or less, whatever, I don't know. I think that whole definition doesn't even really mean anything anymore. It's kind of ubiquitous. It means something different to everybody. Over half of them in Canada right now are part-time entrepreneurs. I think we saw that. People are starting up their businesses before they even leave school. They're starting them up before they leave their jobs. And in some cases, people are, like me, are taking money out of their home equity and just quitting their job and going for it, jumping in. The average people you can start with $5,000 or less. And I think that even speaks to the fact that there's so much shared software out there, there's freeware, there's space available, there's support from the community. So there's really a lot less of a barrier now to any of your dreams or your ideas. It's all available out there as long as you're willing to do it on your own shoulders and be lean about it. Has anyone in here, go ahead.
Does tech-based mean it's information-based as well, or is it more just platforms?
I think it's probably as loosely defined as possible. So, people writing this are from CPA Canada, and you would know more about tech-based than they are. It's probably a very wide range, But, it's irrelevant for the most part. I think, when I first was talking to Cleo, I said, so you have a startup of your own? And she said, well, I'm, a publicist, and I'm, brand manager, marketing. I mean, startup to me means everything. It's not just tech. I mean, it's, and I think that number is probably reducing as a ratio, although the definition of tech-based is probably widening, so I'm not sure. Solo-run businesses with no employees account for 1.3 million of the 2.4 million total businesses in Canada. Every time I see 2.4 million total businesses in Canada, I always think this seems really low. So it goes to show you that, even if you're just starting up in this room, if there's 10, 25 people starting up a business, I mean, you really are making an impact. You're actually moving the needle. There's not that many. So has anybody in here not read The Lean Startup, or has read? Hands up if you've read The Lean Startup by Eric Ries.
Attended a Lean Startup class.
A Lean Startup class? Did they reference the book in the class, or? Yeah. I found that was, for me, really opened my eyes, that book. Maybe I'm dating myself, but I think if you haven't and you're thinking about getting into a startup, you're starting your business, I mean, it's applicable to, I think, every industry. I would definitely recommend investing the $10 and buying the book, or buying it online. You probably find it for free online somewhere. Pardon me? Eric Ries, Eric, R-I-E-S. Talks a lot about the SaaS metrics that you can look at too, the software as a service metrics, which actually I'm starting to find apply to all types of business and not just software as a service. It's really, it really opened my eyes. So the types of business structures, sole proprietorship. I mean, we've all, probably at this point, everybody's been through Accounting Finance 101. But when you're starting your business, you really want to think about, how do you want to start? Has anybody here's business incorporated yet? Yeah. Anthony's incorporated, you've incorporated yours. The benefits to incorporation and to a corporation, for the most part, is that you get some great tax benefits in terms of the shelter your income. You leave it within the company for as long as you need to, and then when you pull it out, it's taxable to you, whether you pull it out in the form of a dividend, whether you pull it in the form of salary, or whether you pull it out in the form of shareholder distributions, sell pieces of the company. You can leave it in there. Now, the company gets taxed, the corporation gets taxed at the small business tax rate, but that's a lot less than what you would pay as an individual. The other one is that it's limited liability, and that's a big one, especially if you're doing something sort of to the mass market, you're doing something that's exposed to security risk, et cetera. If you're a sole proprietor or a partner, you're liable if something happens. They can come take your house. They can come take, if it's maybe your parents, or depending on how far up the liability goes, you're putting yourself and your personal assets at risk in those situations.
So if you go bankrupt as a sole proprietorship, it's coming right at you, or?
Yes.
It is. Okay.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
the corporation.
That's right. It's a good point. So if you bought some inventory and you owe somebody $50,000, they can come take it from you, whether it's your house or a rental property you have, whatever it is. But if you're incorporated, they can't. They can't do that.
Is there any instance that you would not recommend incorporating?
I think, yeah, it's a start. So there's a lot of benefits to sole proprietorship, and we'll go through them in more detail a little bit, but right off the start, right? Because you're sort of just wading into this venture, there's some costs to incorporation. So it's a cost-benefit analysis. You usually have to get a lawyer. You have to go and register, create a company. There's a couple $1,000s of startup costs there. So depending on what type of a barrier that is to you, then that's really the risk. The other is that sort of if you've got some other ventures that you've had as a sole proprietor, and you already have some losses, there's some tax benefits to staying as a sole proprietor. I don't want to get too much into taxes because it's not my strength. I've been out of practice for so long that it's not great for me to be giving advice on it. But that's the ones for sole proprietor. One of the keys that I'll talk about again later is with sales tax, and there's a threshold in Ontario of $35,000. Some of you may have heard of this. You don't have to charge HST on the services that you're providing until you hit that threshold of $35,000 within a 1-year period. And so once you're a corporation, you're supposed to register for HST right away. As your sole proprietor, you can get away with doing that without charging it. And so that's one of the benefits to that. Some other questions there. Okay. Partnership's a little bit more complicated, but I think anytime you're getting involved with more than one person and you want to be equal and you're not ready to incorporate, then a partnership's a good way to do it. I think there's a lot of tax benefits to partnerships, which again, you should reach out to somebody if you want to know specifically what those are, beyond the scope of this. But important though, if you are going to get into a partnership with a person, that you know who they are, you trust them. There is some personal liability in a partnership, and you want to have a strict partnership agreement that really lays out who's responsible for what and who gets what. Otherwise, you're ultimately going to end up with problems. So again, here's some of the talking points on it. It's the simplest way, sole proprietor. It's the least costly. Your net income just gets taxed to you just like you would if you were working. It's part of your taxable income. There's some great advantages to that one in terms of your personal costs in order to do the work. If you're a corporation, then if you buy something, it should be the name of the corporation, for example, your car. But if it's a sole proprietor, you can expense some things a little easier. Again, the tax advantage to some losses. Risk is the downside, and you may need to ultimately register your business. Partnership, really it's defined as a relationship that exists between two persons, and they're carrying on a business together. Make sure you've got a contract. Ultimately, if you don't have a written contract, the law might default to a verbal contract, an email, a text, whatever, right? So don't leave it up to chance in those situations. If there's one thing I've learned about startups, a lot like relationships, I mean, they get under stress. And the weaker connections that you have won't last. The stronger connections that you have will last. But through that process of discovering that, you're going to have some fallouts. You're going to have some people that you have to let go. You're going to have some people that fight or get mad. It doesn't seem like it at the time. It's like a high school romance, but ultimately something goes wrong.
I just wanted to ask, you mentioned on the last slide about you might have to register your business. What is that process about? What is registering your business?
So registering as you get, even as a sole proprietor, if you're selling more than $35,000 worth of product, you'd ultimately have to register for an HST, for example.
So that's what you just mean, register for HST?
Yeah, and for taxes, yeah. You got to basically get on the radar. So corporation, I think those ones are pretty obvious. One of the big benefits too that a lot of people don't know about with HST is that in most situations, you're going to start your company and you'll be in a net spend position for the first couple of years, first 2 years, whatever it is. You're burning more money than you're bringing in. And so the way that input tax credits work, an input tax credit is when you buy a product and you pay your 13% tax, that's an input tax credit. You've spent in a simple scenario, you've had $1,000 of burn a month. You've paid $130 in HST, your input tax credit. Let's say you have no revenue. So you've lost, in simple terms, your $1,000 in that period. That $130 is refundable to you. Usually in your first year, it's not refundable until after the full year. And then you apply, and it's the net difference between what you spend on tax, sales tax, and what you've collected in sales tax. Everything you collect in sales tax is, you have to hand that over. That's transferable to the government. But the way it works is that, well, if I've paid out more than I've collected, then there's no use going through the exercise of giving it to them and then getting it back. They just say, give us the net difference, or we owe you the net difference. And so there's a real benefit to being really careful and clean and tracking where you're spending your money, keeping your receipts so you know what the HST is, because if you get audited, you're going to have to prove it. But if you're clean and you're organized, quickly at the end of the period, and you can always elect to do it quarterly if you don't want to do it annually, but you can quickly get that money back and use it to run your business, because it belongs to you. You know, as part of a business, you don't have to pay sales tax. Okay. Legal protection's a big one. Like I said, you can change your year end. It doesn't have to be on a calendar year. Some people, there is some tax advantages and even just operational advantages to have it at different times of the year. Anything on that section before we move on to the business plan? Anything else in terms of taxes and sales tax? Yeah, go ahead, sorry.
Does it make sense to, say, buy another corporation that's shutting down? So let's say it wasn't successful and has all these expenses. Does it make sense to just buy for $1 so you can take all their expenses and then that way save on?
I mean, if it was as simple as, for example, they had $10,000 of input tax credits refundable to them, and there was going to be no other cost to you buying this business, yeah, it'd be great. But I think someone would incorporate that into the sale price of the company. They'd say, well, I know the government owes me 10 grand and HST, so I'm not going to sell it to you for $1. If they did, then great. But you might be taking on the risks of that, other collection risks of that company. So probably in a perfect world, sure. I'd never really see a lot of situations where people buy it just for the HST. When you start talking about income tax losses, a whole different world. And sure, it definitely does, especially if you think you're going to generate enough income that you're going to be able to take advantage of those losses right away. And there's certain rules. You can only go back 4 years or 7 years, something like that, in order to take advantage of those losses. And so you really have to make sure you're doing the math and figure it out when you're going to take advantage of those losses. You got to be pretty confident that you're going to be in a profitable situation in order to take advantage of them. Otherwise, you're wasting your money. But again, like if you ever get to that scenario, I would talk to a tax accountant or lawyer, or either one of them.
Is it advisable to open an LLC instead of incorporating in Canada as a Canadian and maybe opening up an LLC in a state like Nevada, for example, for the tax benefits of it? Or is it just easier to go with a Canadian LLC?
So what's your name?
Mej.
Mej? So Mej was asking, is it advisable to maybe open an LLC in the States in order to take advantage of the zero state tax in some place like Nevada or Delaware? I'd say no, not at this stage. And I've opened companies in the States, in Nevada and in Delaware, and it's not hard. It's quite easy. The reality is though you have to ask yourself what the benefit is, right? Like if you're doing business in Ontario with Ontario residents, or in Canada with Canadian residents, then you're subject to the same taxes, right? And if you are a resident in Canada, and you own the corporation and you're the sole owner, then you're a Canadian-controlled private corporation, a CCPC. And there's a lot of advantages to being a Canadian-controlled private corporation that we can talk about. But so if you did that and you opened up in the States, you'd have to really know why you're doing it. And if that's to avoid income taxes or anything else, you got a pretty good company because that means you're already making money if you're avoiding income tax right off the bat. Yeah. And it's always easy to do it later on. I think the real reason that most people open a company in the States in LLC is they want to get a U.S. bank account. They have a lot of U.S. customers. They're taking in a lot of U.S. dollars and they just want to house the dollars there. And then they end up creating what's called sort of a transfer pricing strategy, which again is at the next level up, but it's basically saying that the business that you're operating in the States is really just there as a service provider to us, and it's on a cost plus 5%. So it involves some higher level tax management. But for most startups here, I think if you did that, you would be avoiding the benefits of SR&ED, for example, if you turned it into a non-Canadian controlled corporation. All the other grants that are available, you know what SR&ED is? Sorry? Oh, okay. Well, we'll get to that. But there's a lot of benefits to, the Canadian government has a lot of benefits to small businesses and startups to help fund you that you would be, you basically disqualifying yourself from by being a U.S. company. That's the biggest reason for it. And the Canadian business tax is better than the U.S. business tax. Doing business in the States right now is extremely difficult, especially at the state level. The states were, and I think they still are, in a lot of fiscal stress. And so they're pushing really hard to collect as much tax revenue as they can. As you saw, I think Amazon was in California. There was the big push to start actually charging sales tax and stuff. So you really, you're making your life a lot more complicated than you need to for probably no gain.
If you're a Canadian company with an HST number and you're working with an American client, how do you invoice them with that HST HST number, like, do you take that into account at all? Or?
I think you should probably have the HST number on your invoice at all times, but you don't have to charge them HST. Okay. With some caveats that you should check and make sure. There might be some unique situations. But for the most part, provincial and federal sales tax in Canada is depending on where the person, for the most part, the person that you're selling the service to, where they're located, and what province you're selling it in, basically. So if you're selling to the States, you don't have to charge any sales tax.
So you have to have an HST number if you make above 35,000 is the ceiling. If you're approaching that and you're not, like I'm not sure that I should register for it until I know that I'm going to be above that for our tax year, and I guess I'm not sure when we ought to do that.
I'd wait till you pass it.
Okay.
Wait till you've passed the mark and you know that, because I think they actually give you, I think it's a month and a half, it might be a month. There's this sort of like window that they have, like once you've passed the threshold, because they understand it. Just like you said, I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know when I'm going to pass that mark. So once they do, then you have like a month or something like that, and that's just to apply. So now you've applied and you've got time, and you continue to not charge it. You continue to not charge it until you get your registration. Because once you have your registration number, it's black and white. You should be charging HST. If you're registered, you should be charging HST, as long as it's a taxable good, right? Yeah.
I actually just wanted to add, just because I wish that someone had told me this about GST, that it's not that it's any 12-month period, so that within which you collect 35 grand, and also you can go back and ask people retroactively for the HST if you didn't charge it, and most people will give it to you. So even if you did screw up in that way, you can go back.
Yeah, that's right. It's sort of, I think they call it four consecutive quarters, quarters being a 3-month period, so 12 months. And I mean, you're right, you can go back and ask. I'd say whether or not people will pay it, there's different things to keep in consideration, right? Some might, but I'm in client service. I'm all service-based, right? For my clients, if I went back to them and said, hey, I forgot to charge you as HST, you might give me another, you owe me $12,000 for the last year, they'd probably say, go to hell, right? Or they'd say, Rustin, you want me to take my business elsewhere, right? So it can be a sensitive situation, especially when you're dealing with, and we'll talk about this as well, when you start dealing with independent contractors. A lot of people one of the ways to not hire someone on as an employee, which encourages employee taxes, payroll taxes, liability, et cetera, is to hire people as an independent contractor. And when you're doing that, you don't have to pay them. They don't need to collect HST unless they're making more than $35,000 a year as an independent contractor. At times, the CRA could look negatively at you and say, hey, you should have been giving them, they should have been charging you HST. You should have been paying HST on that invoice. They don't have the money to pay us. You need to pay us as the person that was giving them the money. So it can be a touchy situation. But in my experience, the CRA is pretty reasonable. When you're starting a business, you call them up. They're really quite friendly at answering your questions. You don't even have to give them your information. And that's what I would recommend, that the more that you're on the phone with the CRA as you're creating your business, if you don't have a tax advisor or an accountant that you can afford right off the bat, I get on the phone with them frequently and ask them a lot of questions. Okay, business plan. Does anybody here already have a business plan made up for their business? Anthony's got one. Yep, you've got one. And you've included taxes and sales taxes, and you've considered, and is it profitable? You haven't got to that part yet, right? And so, and I know the feeling, because you get excited, you have an idea, you've got, alignment across a couple people that you're working with, and you just sort of jump in and get going. I think it's worth the time to sit down, Google a couple of them, and you'll find some templates out there. They're pretty helpful. They're pretty easy to do as long as you're comfortable with Excel. There's also software-based ones that you can get on. What's one of the good ones? Life Plan, is it called? My Plan. They're getting pretty good. Some of the SaaS ones that are out there, you can get them on a trial basis. But you really want to know, is this a viable business that I'm looking at here? And again, you don't have a crystal ball. You don't know all the variables that you're going to have to deal with and the costs, but it's good to make sure that it actually works. And consider the cash flow impacts, not just I'm going to make this much money on a monthly basis. How much cash flow am I going to have? And am I going to be able to make it through some of these periods if you have a seasonal business or if you're hiring up in order to deal with the volume that comes in? You have to pay those people. And so how are you going to finance it? So some of the elements of a good business plan, nice and simple. You should have a cover page, a table of contents, an executive summary, have your goals and objectives. Talk about your management. If you guys are ever looking for funding, you're ever going to apply to get into a place like the DMZ or into an incubator, if you ever want to impress people, they're very interested in your team. Your team and you in particular is huge. It's like when you're job hunting and you've been working someplace for several years and you're kind of out of practice of taking interviews. The best thing to do is just get out there and start taking interviews, even if it's at Subway or wherever it is. Like, the more interviews you do, the better you get at it. The more pitches you do, the more people that you talk about your company with, the better you get at selling it, and also the better you get at getting feedback on it, and you start to realize, wait a sec, every person I talk to sort of thinks that's a stupid idea, or that particular part of the business isn't what I should be focusing on. It's a great way to get feedback. Management, so that's management, your marketing strategy, your financial projections, hardest part if you're not financially literate, but somebody usually knows someone in the family that can help you with that, friends or family. Lists of advisors, your conclusion, and any appendices. Advisors are really key. If you can find some good advisors through referrals, friends and family, investors, it really helps to have somebody who's reasonably well connected and generous with their time.
I just want to ask, on the previous page, you're talking about how to charging money. And I don't know whether there's a standard about this, but one of the issues that I'm running into is that sometimes my clients won't pay me for, sometimes it's a month, sometimes it's 2 months. Someone told me that it was okay to actually put on my invoices, must be paid within 30 days, and then I could make up a percentage of, after this point. Is there a standard?
There's a standard. There's a standard, and then there is whatever you want it to be as well. You're allowed to put whatever you want on there.
But they have to agree. I guess I would have to have a conversation with whoever I was contracting to.
Yes. When you go into business with the person, you've got to sort of lay out the terms of the sale. And a lot of times it doesn't happen explicitly. So to hit them with some sort of ridiculous credit card size rate, interest rate, because it's not paid the day after you give the invoice, whether or not you'd actually get to the point where there was any legal action is probably not appropriate. What would probably happen is that you'd start losing business, or it'd be one-time business, right? Because people are like, well, this is ridiculous. But yeah, there's pretty much open flexibility to what you want to charge interest on the terms. So if you're not familiar with how an invoicing or an accounts receivable works, it's basically you've done some business with somebody. The cost of that business on the invoice is $100, and you set the terms. It's either due within 15 days, it's due within 30 days, it's due within 60 days, and anything past the due date, so let's say it's due in 30, and everything after that is charged 1% a month interest or 12% annually, 1% a month kind of thing, for every month that it's overdue. That's very normal in business. It's also very normal.
1% isn't normal.
20% is normal totally, yeah.
Oh, I thought you said 1%.
1% per month. Anywhere between 12 to 20% is pretty reasonable. I see 18% lots. I mean, it's there to be a deterrent because what people do in the world, and you guys will do it, I do it, is you leverage your suppliers and your vendors in order to help your cash flow. If I have to pay my employee and I have to pay my vendor, and I've only got $1,000, and I need, I'm going to give it to my employee first, right? Or I'm going to use it to keep the lights on first before I pay a supplier who I know will sort of let me get off 2, 3, 4 months down the road. So I guess 2 lessons from that. Everybody else sort of does it to their suppliers and vendors and takes advantage of it. You might want to think about it yourself at times if you need to. It's in a lot of cases, people don't even charge the interest. So if it comes down to paying your supplier with your credit card and then you paying the interest on your credit card because you didn't pay it on time because you're making minimum payments, or finding a supplier who's going to give you 3 months to pay, take advantage of that. That's another form of financing, and it's at the best rate possible, 0, right? So do that. You know, a lot of cases, if you get into stress down the road too, it's not great for your credit rating if they end up reporting you, but they might cut you a deal down the road. You may end up owing them $400 or $500. They'll say, give us $300 or 75 cents on the dollar and we'll call it even. So you're going to get yourself in these types of situations for sure. Now, in terms of the other side of it, picking customers can be almost as important as picking your employees. If you're in a high volume business, a SaaS company, online subscriptions, et cetera, you're not going to be able to pick your customers, right? They're signing up, they're going on a high volume, they're anonymous. That's not the same. In those cases, you're not usually loaning those people the money in terms of giving them terms. They're paying you up front. They're putting their credit card on there, and there's no collection issues. But if you are extending people credit in the sense that they're not paying for 15, 30 days, be careful who you're doing business with, because a lot of people will stiff you. And the sooner that you can get paid, the faster you can scale up your company and pay your own bills. Yeah.
Yeah, just a follow-up question. I've also had the situation where sometimes I have this, my brain forgets what
Dude, I do it all the time, man. So it's the consequences of a misspent youth.
Go ahead and answer your question.
Yeah, right before you asked that question, you said something about knowing well-connected people.
Yeah.
I missed.
Well, I'm just saying for advisors, most companies, as you're starting to get off the ground, you find an advisor, right? If it's a lawyer, a friend of the family, or it's somebody that you've met at a conference. Say it was me, you met and you reached out and you're like, hey, Rustin, I really liked what you said. Do you know anything about this? Like, do whatever you got to do, right? I mean, you're going to find that it's not easy, right? In a lot of cases, it's begging. In a lot of cases, it's relationships. A lot of cases, just getting out there and meeting people and asking. And before you know it, the more times you've asked, just like my interview analogy, the more time you do it, you get better at it. And you start to build this network of people that are willing to help at times.
Okay, just when you need them for whatever situation, things like that.
Just for advice. And a lot of times, it's just picking up the phone. Hey, I'm thinking about going into the payment space. And I don't know anybody that even has a credit card, or I don't know anything about credit cards. Do you have any connections at a credit card where I could go in and see what they're up to? Like anything like that, yeah. Right? But most companies do have like a couple. If you go to most websites and it's got sort of about, you'll see some of their lists of advisors. They're usually like, for the successful companies, they're ex-CEOs or board members of big companies or people that are involved at Ryerson or whatever it is. You know?
So in my business, I often am estimating how long something's going to take, and I don't necessarily, it's sometimes hard to tell. There are variables that I can't predict.
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering if you have any standards around that for how to manage expectations around, basically what I've been doing so far is I will quote an amount, and if I happen to work more than I think I will, then I just have to suck it up. So I have to be careful.
Yeah, well, that's a tough one, and that's the same in my business. And the classic for accountants, professional services is always hourly, right? That was always the answer. You pay me, I come up with an hourly rate that covers my costs and built in some profit margin, whatever it is, and that way I know I'm safe, whatever I do by the hour. The problem is my hour of time, was it a valuable hour of time to the client? Did I actually do everything that I needed to do in that hour, or did I waste 15 minutes of that hour? So it's a tough one.
Are you saying that you would tell them in advance how many hours you're going to finish?
You could give them an estimate, but you could say, I think it's going to, a lot of people sell blocks of hours, for example, in the software business, in the software development business. They'll say, okay, I'm going to sell you 20 blocks of hours, a block of 20 hours at $100 an hour. So they give you $2,000. And they say, it expires after 3 months. But within that 3 months, I'm committing to you that I'm going to do software development for you, and I'm going to use that $2,000 that you gave me on an hourly basis to credit the time that I've used. Now, if you use less, I'll refund it to you, or I'll roll it into the next contract, for example. Other people go with flat, like in the accounting and the bookkeeping world right now, there's a big shift towards what they call value billing, which is I'll give you an estimate of what I think it's going to be worth, and it's a flat amount and it won't change regardless of how long it takes me.
And that's what I was going to ask.
That's yours. You go with a flat amount.
It's discrete projects, and they want to know how much they're going to have to pay for it in advance.
Yeah.
And it's tricky.
It is. It is tricky. It's a tough thing to do. One that I would say is it recurring business or is it usually one-off?
So I do work with the same clients on different projects, yeah.
Same clients on different projects. So then the added value that you get to that is, let's say you do get shorted on your first one or your second one or your third one by 15% on each one. As long as you can keep the lifetime of that client, you build up that, it's all about the lifetime value of that client, right? So if you can keep them in your ecosystem for 3 years or 36 months and you still get to keep doing those contracts, you'll make it up over time.
And what I do actually is on the invoices, I will tell them if I ended up taking more time so that they are at least clear on it for the next time.
Yeah,
I charge them.
and what you might want to think about too is always show it, right? Like if it cost you $2,000 to do it and you only charged them $1,000, show it. Say, hey, here was your discount. I was over, but it's on me. It was more than the quote. You know, and you can even keep a running track of that and say over the past 2 years to your client, you can say, I've actually undercharged you by $5,000, but you're a loyal client and it's my fault and whatever else. You know, it's like not-for-profit discounts. People always give not-for-profit discounts, but you always show it. You don't just give them the net amount. You show it and you say it's $2,000 plus your discount. You want people to know what it is that you're giving them. But that goes back to the lean startup, if you're going to read that. A lot of that is about, you've got your users / your clients, and it's not always just about the money that you've made on that one particular contract. Is it recurring, and what's the life of that customer? And if you can keep using them over and over again, then you got to look at the total amount that you've invested and what the total return is from that client. It's really cool. You'll really like it.
Book that you recommended, the Lean Startup, they're dead against business plans. Do you still recommend like the business plan? Is it worthwhile initially to do so?
For the lean startup? So you've read it? Yeah. Is that what you're saying? Yeah. So in there, so he's talking about just go with the MVP, just get in there right off the bat, get out to market and iterate from there. I think it's still important if you're going to invest time and money to look at your idea. It doesn't have, I think even in the book, I think he suggests that put some pen to paper and get some ideas, but don't expect it to be perfect and don't spend all your time getting to work on it, right? And the other aspect is that if you do need any sort of external funding, whether it's from the bank or some friends and family, they're gonna wanna see it. And so I think it's still a good exercise. Even for yourself, it's a good exercise just to see. I mean, some people have zero financial literacy and they may not know that if you're selling something for $5, but it costs you $7 to make it, you don't have a business. Not on a recurring level, maybe at the start, and you're gonna improve and you're gonna get that 7 down to 3 and you're gonna get the 5 up to 8, then chart that out and just to take a look at it, right? I think it's still worthwhile. Everything in the book's not perfect, and there's 500 books written on agile development or whatever it is, and so, yeah. Good question, man. I'm glad somebody's read it. So again, I think we went through this. Look at the assets that you got to buy, whether it's inventory, equipment, computers, etc. And again, if you're a sole proprietor or incorporate or partner, make sure you're including that in your taxes, right? Make sure you're including those costs when you're looking at what it's costing you, because there is tax breaks for all those things. The cost of starting it up, excuse me. And then recurring costs, of course, are really important, right? You have to look at what the recurring costs are. Is anybody here familiar with the concept of gross margin? Sorry, is anybody not familiar with the concept of gross margin? Okay, so you have a business that you typically, in a really simplified form, you've got your revenues, which is the money you're taking in. You've got your costs of creating or your cost of goods sold. And then the difference between those two things is your gross profit. So ignore like your rent and ignore the utility bills, ignore your accounting fees, things like that. Just your simple, for me to walk over here and create the paper cup, to buy the paper cup, to buy the lid, to create the coffee, pour it in my time to do that, that's my cost of goods sold. That cost me $1. The revenue, I bought the coffee for $1.25. That 25 cents is my gross profit. Ignore everything else so that you don't get confused. If you can't make that gross profit work, then you don't have a business. the fixed costs, the overhead, things like that, I'd say that this generation of entrepreneurs, you're in the best position of any in history to be able to take advantage of the fixed costs of what people might call overhead. I'm working out of my home. I built an office in the backyard eventually, so I've got a great little space back there. All my employees work from home. I have 2 people that moved recently, and they didn't have to leave their jobs because they had to be on location. So I'm not paying any rent. I'm not paying any insurance on location. I'm not paying any commuting fees, nothing. I mean, and we can all stay connected because of cloud bookkeeping and cloud accounting now. In the past, the accounting and bookkeeping business was forced to be in a local position, and everybody had to be in the office to deal with all the paper and plug all the receipts in. And it's opened it right up. It's completely disrupted it, and that's why I'm trying to take advantage of it. So the overhead, the below the line type things, below the gross margin line, don't worry so much about that stuff, but make sure the inputs that it takes to create what it is you're selling, you're at least have a reasonable margin on top of what it is when the dollar that you're getting. Make sure the dollar that you're receiving, make sure you're not spending more than that dollar. And ideally, I think in the software business, if you're in the software business, the gross margin typically is anywhere from 60 to 80%, which means it should only cost you 20 cents to create that dollar of revenue that you're getting after you've already invested all the money to create the platform. Okay. Cash flow and financing. So we talked quickly about this. Does anybody know what SHRED is? Has anybody heard of SHRED? SR&ED? Might just be the acronym that you're not familiar with. Scientific Research and Development Credits. So the Canadian government provides scientific research and experimental development credits. It's a refundable tax credit. So the difference between this and a lot of government tax credits is that this one's refundable. So even if you make no money for 5 years, this is a refundable credit. You get it back at the end of the year. And in a lot of cases, it can be close to about 40% of your research and development spend. And software development falls right into that. I mean, this was created initially, I think, for more large-scale scientific research and development, maybe some of the stuff you're doing, biomed, that kind of stuff. But this is why one of the reasons why there's so many software companies in Toronto and in Canada. And that's why one of the reasons why there's so many US companies willing to invest in Canada, because they know that they often get a 40% discount because the Canadian government will get it back to them. You know, when I was at Wave, and we would sit in the board meetings, guys would be like, we're burning X amount of dollars, Rustin, how much of this are we getting back? They wanted to see that we're getting back almost 40% of it. And they want you to be aggressive on your claims. So every one of you should be taking that into consideration when you're going into this, is that you've got a huge advantage over US corporations. And back to Mejda's point, you'd be missing out on that if you were a US owned company. And so what a lot of companies will do, even as you get funded up, like a Shopify, for example, I bet you their SHRED credit is in the tens of millions anyway. I would be surprised. And so I bet you they're still a Canadian-controlled corporation, even if a lot of the shareholders, they went public, I think, right? So I bet you they still have majority ownership as a Canadian-controlled corporation. I could be totally wrong, but it's a huge source of revenue. It's a huge source of funding for everybody in here.
Say you have a co-founder who's technical, right? But you're not paying them right now because you're building the platform.
Yep.
Can you claim that?
You can. So it's just important to delineate between paying somebody cash, like giving them cash, and paying them, in the sense that, I mean, there's always a quid pro quo in the sense of people don't do things for free. So why is he doing it? He's a co-founder, so his time has a value to it, right? And so I think what you do is, from a financial perspective, you are paying him, right? His time is worth money, and you calculate what that is, and that goes into your claim. And you say, okay, between the two of us, our time is worth this much, and you make that claim based on that. Now, that being said, you will owe tax on that. You'll have to pay payroll taxes on that if he's an employee. If he's an independent contractor, you wouldn't. He would have to pay his own income taxes on it. You know, at the end of the day, you're paying him, but you're just not exchanging the cash for it, right? Anything else on SHRED? I mean, there's all sorts too. It's not just SHRED. There's IRAP. which is the innovative research and something. It's really for like anybody who's in the gaming industry, anybody that's in creating a website of some sort. I mean, lots of money there. SOFIA is the Southern Ontario funding for innovation, something like that. And there's also companies, because it can be overwhelming, there's companies out there that they just help you get these grants. I should have brought some names for you. You guys could have reached out to them, but and they take a cut of it, right? I mean, SHRED, which is the acronym for Scientific Research and Experimental Development. There's so many SHRED consultants out there right now. It's a huge industry. They'll go out there, they'll take 10 to 20% of the claim, but you won't have to do anything. Well, you'll still have to do some stuff for it, but they're the ones managing it for you, making sure that you get the money. I mean, if you take nothing else away from the session today, look that stuff up. That's important stuff. That's money in the bank.
So a regular accountant, when you put in SHRED, if you
Oh yeah, lots of regular accountants will do it too. But the problem is that it's pretty niche based. Like you've got to be, you sort of got to know what you're doing. And so most accountants will say, well, you should get a consultant for it. Depends on the size, right? Like the claim itself is not that difficult if you're small and it's pretty specific. But if you have a reasonable sized company, it's all about projects. So you really have to, create the number. You could have 4 or 5 different projects going on within your company, and say you're spending $1 million a year. You got to break that million into which projects are doing what and what sort of development and research you're doing. So there's a bit of like storytelling involved with it in order to get the money.
So that should be done before your taxes are done, right? 'Cause then
It can be done at the same time as your taxes. Yeah. But you can go back too. If you haven't done it and you've already, in previous years, you can go back. I think you can go back a couple years even. So take a look at that. The consultants they all work on a contingency basis, so they won't charge you anything, and that's the beauty of it. They won't charge you anything up front until the money has come from the government. So that's another nice benefit of using the consultants. Yeah.
So for my business, we do, like, research and development is something that we're going to be finished with because we work from project to project and there's R&D for each project. But would something like that apply to us?
Totally.
So each time we're developing something new, I can
Yep.
claim.
And that's even better. That's what they like to see, right? They like to see a challenge. They like to see an investment towards solving that challenge, completion, move on to the next one. They love that compartmentalized investment because that's the whole goal of it. They don't want to just be throwing money at people for, coming up with a company. They'd like it to be more specific. Now, people bend the rules and they're flexible and, but that kind of compartmentalized investment makes it a lot easier to get the money. Yeah.
Could you clarify what experimental development is?
Tough to clarify, but for the most part, if you're in the software business, if you've got a software or a tech-related company, you'll get it. You'll find a way to get it for the most part. And if you don't, at least you've tried, right? Worst case scenario, they decline it, right? And so, and you've used a consultant, and usually they'll tell you right off the bat, they'll be like, what are you doing? First interview you have, what are you guys doing? Okay, it's a little gray, let's see what else. And they'll tell you whether or not they can get you any money.
So is it generally it's tech generally, so if you're developing an app or something like that?
Not necessarily. If you're in biomed, it doesn't have to be tech. I think it is tech, but it doesn't have to be. It has to be a problem that you are looking for. You're engineering a solution to a problem, I think is it. I mean, again, I do everything at the surface level. I don't know anything below that. Like, don't quote me on anything. My advice would be that everybody that should look into it. You should look into it. And Sophie, for example, is not even necessarily tech only. I mean, innovation, right? That's a broad definition. There's a lot out there. And for hiring, there's a lot too. The government will pay for you to hire people under 30 years old, all sorts of stuff. You should really do your research on that stuff. Lots of opportunity, yeah.
So for SHRED, can the founder also
As long as you are.
You have a history that you can show that this is the salary you were getting, and then now you started this company.
You don't even necessarily need the history. You just need to be paying yourself. As long as you're paying yourself, and it may not necessarily be in cash, it might be in money owed, money still owed to you, that's investment.
But the salary has to be reasonable, right? So I guess they would look at the history of
The salary, yeah, it has to be reasonable, but there's also caps on all of it, right? Like, so, yeah, if you paid yourself a ridiculous amount of money, then you probably wouldn't be able to afford the taxes on it anyway. But Interesting question, but I'm sure there is. Yeah, yeah.
How do you find out about the things like paying people under 30, getting credits for paying people under 30? Where would that
I think once, if you went on and you just started Googling some of it, it would just, you'd find a whole bunch of it. And then you'll start getting ads redirected to you once you've probably done a couple times that for the people that are consultants for it.
Ministry of Ontario.
Ministry of Ontario.
Youth Employment Services in Ontario will give you guys information about those programs where they subsidize. So I used to work for them, so.
Yeah, perfect. That's right. So, and there's going to be federal ones. There's going to be Ontario one, provincial ones.
Sorry, the Ministry of Ontario, the federal government, if you type in something like, make your Boolean search subsidy and Ontario and work, it'll come up, or the Youth Employment Services in Ontario. If you just Google Youth Employment Services and then add subsidy to it, it'll give you the information. There's also like the grants pages on the Ministry of Ontario and then the federal government. It'll redirect you to these pages.
And type consultants in on one of those searches, and you'll find some of the guys that'll do it for you too. Put consultants in there on one of your searches, and you'll find some guys, some local guys that are doing it. And there's crowdfunding, friends and family, and then I think there's a lot of capital out there right now looking to be invested. So if you've got, they're all going to be looking at making sure that you're taking advantage of the government subsidies, but the other is making sure that you've got clean books and records, which I'm going to touch on a little bit more, and which is really a key area for me. And it comes down to your operations. Some of the little rules of thumb that you want to make sure that you're doing, that a lot of people wouldn't know about. Separating out your personal and your business accounts. Right off the bat, if you're going to start a business, keep those things as separate as you can. It gets really ugly when you are, everybody does it. Takes out money out of their own bank account in order to pay something for the business. But keep your receipts. Try to deal with it on a frequent basis. Get some accounting software. I would recommend QuickBooks Online. I think it scales well with you. It's not expensive. There's a lot of times they're giving startup discounts where you might only have to pay $10 a month or something like that for the software. It's got a lot of third-party apps that integrate in with it. Wave is an okay alternative, except I'm seeing a lot of issues now at the DMZ where a lot of people they started with Wave and then they hit this ceiling, and now they've got to transition all of their stuff over to, and I'm helping them with that, and it's not easy, over to QuickBooks Online so that they can scale up. So if you have the opportunity now, maybe start with a QuickBooks Online right off the bat. The advantage of Wave is it's absolutely free. So that's the only benefit there. If you have a credit card and you can get a credit card for your company, do that. It's a really nice, easy way to separate out your business expenditures from your personal expenditures. And then at the end of if you're bad and you don't look at any of it until the end of the year, at least you've got your credit card statement, which makes it really clear. And all of the new online accounting software allows you to hook up your bank and your credit cards to your accounting software. And so it'll import the transactions for you automatically directly in there. If you only have everything mixed on one card, then you're going to have to import everything and then sort of start deleting stuff, and it just gets messy. Spreadsheets are spreadsheets. If you want to use them, fine, but I would advise against it. They're not safe. They're messy. It's a lot of work. A good, solid online software like QuickBooks will allow you to manage your cash flow better. You'll be able to see what your bank accounts are if you're reconciling them. Just being clean, having good accounting records. It seems to me that the best clients that I have that I work with, the most successful ones, have immaculate operations, and they look after all of their documentation, and they just keep it clean, and they care about being organized. They seem to be the most successful ones. As you do get a little bit bigger, start thinking about your cash reserves. I'll grab you 1 second, Anthony. But what a lot of people make the mistake of, and this is as you get a bit bigger than some of the companies now, but you're collecting HST. So you're out there and you're charging people, you're sending people invoices with 13% HST on it. Let's say that you had $100,000 in revenue that year. You owe $13,000 to the government, don't forget. Let's say that your expenses, you weren't paying much HST out in this scenario. You owe the government $13,000. What happens to a lot of people is they're not tracking that through the year. They just forget about that. And it's nice to forget about it because you got an extra $13,000 that you've spent now. The end of the year comes along because typically in the first year you don't have to report or pay your HST until really 15 months after your start date. Now you've got this bill of $13,000 to whatever $1,000 that you owe. It's tough. And all of a sudden you're trying to find that at the same time as funding your business. So the best practice for everybody is once you start invoicing and you're including sales tax, create a separate bank account and start moving that money over. Start putting your HST, the amount that you owe to the government, in a separate account. Get a high savings on it, although in these days it's not going to earn you much, but still segregate it and keep it aside for the government. It's just not worth I mean, if you absolutely need the cash, it's there as a source to use, as long as you know that 15 months from when you're doing it, you're going to be able to pay it back. And then after that first year, it turns quarterly. Most people are quarterly after that first year, so you're going to have to turn that money over more frequently anyway. Yeah.
Sorry, you mentioned that companies will grow out of Wave and they have to go to QuickBooks. What's the cap? I wasn't aware.
It's no cap. There is no cap. It's just the functionality of it. It doesn't have some of the integrations that Xero or QuickBooks have. It doesn't have classes. It's slower. It's just not as good. That's the problem with it. QuickBooks has been in the business for decades, and they know what they're doing a little bit more. So Wave is great for a lot of things. Cost is the best one. Yeah, that's all. That's what I mean by you grow out of it.
So I'm trying to build systems for keeping track of my receipts. I'm trying to be like some of those businesses you mentioned who are very organized. And it's to me about building systems. I'm curious about the systems that you mentioned.
That's a good question.
I could keep paper receipts, or I could take pictures of receipts.
Yeah, I would take pictures. So I use, and this is basically primary benefit to the platform I use and what I sell to businesses is using a combination of QuickBooks Online or another online accounting software and an app called Receipt Bank. You ever heard of Receipt Bank? Receipt Bank.
The whole world downloads it right now.
Yeah, it's fantastic. It's not free though, unfortunately. It's not too bad though. It's probably cost you $15 a month or something like that. So for every receipt that I get, like I just bought this coffee before the session, I do the same thing. I just open up my app right here. I take a picture of it, submit, and this goes right into this general inbox of all the receipts that I have. The software uses optical character recognition, scans the paper document, turns it into a digital document, and fills in the fields and indexes this document for me. Sales tax, supplier, amount, date. The nice thing about it too is it picks up, you might not even know this, but on almost every receipt, it shows the last 4 digits of the card that was used to buy it. So your last 4 numbers of your credit card, last 4 numbers of your debit card, they're on there. And so what Receipt Bank does, once you've mapped it, it picks that up, and then you know who's bought it. So if I have companies, Anthony, that have 4 founders or 10 employees, I set up one Receipt Bank for them and integrate it with their online accounting software. All these guys are taking pictures, whether it's their personal card or whether it's the company credit card. At the end of the month, I just look on this one general interface, and I can see who spent what, and all of that integrates with their accounting software. So I just publish it. And because it's picked up all of the details, it does the accounting entries for me. And I just reconcile that to the bank feeds that I'm bringing in from the other side so that I know that they're actually legit transactions, that they've been captured on their credit cards. And the other side is for the personal expenses that they'd incurred, it creates an expense report for them. You'll find that creating expense reports and paying expense reports is a huge pain in the ass for your company as it grows. People hate it. It's always one of these things that if I walk into a company and I say, I'm going to use this software, I'm going to do this, they're like, where can I sign up? And so I know for you guys as your own startup, if you can do it yourself, you'll love it. Like, use Receipt Bank, sign up, pay the $20 a month or whatever it is, integrate it with QuickBooks. You're out $35 a month at this point, if that's what it is. It's worth every penny. Yeah, it's fantastic.
Is there a consumer version of that, kind of like Mint?
Mint is different. Mint.
But you can take pictures of the receipts. Like, is
Yep.
that, and ClickBank does that, or
Mint is a budgeting tool more than anything else. Okay. So in Mint's case, it's meant to help you build your budget. It integrates with all of your different bank accounts and your cards in order to start to track where you're spending your money so that you can now basically chart that against the future, right? And see what you've been doing, and the past, see what you've been doing.
you can't take pictures with receipts?
No, you can take pictures with receipts and attach it. With Mint, I'm not even sure if you can with Mint or whether that even fits into the model, but there is other pieces of software that you can do that with. You can do it with Box, you can do it with Dropbox, you can do it with Google Docs, all those things, but they don't all have the optical character recognition. That's the difference with something like Receipt Bank. It actually scans the document itself and turns it into a digital document, which instantly allows it to index. Like I can look up for any of my clients at any point, I can type in Starbucks and it'll pull up every expense that they've had against Starbucks, right? And then I can go down one layer further and say, okay, give me all the Starbucks receipts last year. Or give me all the Starbucks receipts between $10 and $15. Give me all the Starbucks receipts with all those parameters plus these last 4 digits of the credit card because I want to know what Jane spent, et cetera. So it's far more powerful than just attaching it to the There's been lots that allow you just attach things. This is different in the way that it indexes it and turns it into the transaction for you.
And this is for accountants, not consumers?
No, it's for consumers too.
It is, okay.
Totally. Yeah, you can use it for that. Yeah.
Are those images good enough for the CRA to see?
Yes. Yeah, they are. The CRA is a bit cagey in the way that they disclaim it. If you go online and you look at the fine print, they sort of want you to prove that whatever your document management system is, you've got standard operating procedures for it, and you've proved that you're consistent with it. And at the end of the day, I've been through CRA audits and they're fine with them, right? So that doesn't mean that I throw my receipts away. If you want to be perfectly safe, you want to make sure there's zero risk, shove them in a shoebox afterwards and put them away somewhere. I throw mine away, but unless they're really big. Is that your shoebox right there? Yeah.
So would you use Mint then also? Or like,
No. I don't use Mint for anything. I think Mint's more of a consumer for tracking your expenses, helping you budget your family. I don't know anyone that uses Mint for business purposes. I'm pretty close with the people at Intuit. I don't think Mint's really been the success that everyone would like it to be. I mean, I think it's useless, to be honest with you. But yeah, it's my opinion. Okay. But Anthony, that'll change your life, man. With if you start tracking, that shoebox will be gone. I mean,
This is not a good system.
no. Looks cool though, because it looks like you just picked up some new shoes. But Wave actually uses Receipt Bank on their back end. They've rebranded and white labeled it, so they do have it. It's not as effective as the proprietary Receipt Bank when you get it itself. It does use it. I don't like to slag Wave. I love Wave. Like, I'm still an investor in Wave, and I want it to succeed. But especially over the last 8 months, as I've been helping people convert from Wave, it can be challenging, and it does have some issues. So I think it's good for a small business. If you need to save some money, use it. It could be effective. If you want to be more professional and you want something that's going to grow with you and allow you to scale, use QuickBooks. It which? It does. That's one of the big things. It's just like all of a sudden you'll be like, what the hell happened? You get a lot of these like surfer pictures where things aren't working and you're just like, they're like, whoa, what happened? And it's like, well, it might be funny to you guys that all of a sudden I can't find my records, but it's, you know, so that's a common complaint. It's 8 o'clock. I'm just thinking about what is the highest value. I don't think we have much more time. I'm going to skip over the staffing stuff. I think one of the key takeaways with staffing is don't be irresponsible when you are hiring people, especially if you feel like you've got a company with some value to it. Put together a contract, spend the money to get a template contract made. There's a lot of liability that comes with employees, especially when it comes to payroll taxes. Make sure that you have your payroll taxes under control. Something as simple as getting some payroll software like a Wave, QuickBooks Online, there's WagePoint, there's there's lots of them. Even better if you can afford to go to like a Ceridian or an ADP, somebody that really takes all of it off your hands. HST is one thing, but when you don't get your payroll taxes remitted on time and properly, the penalties are a bit severe. So make sure that you're careful with payroll taxes. On the other side of that, a lot of people are hiring contractors, independent contractors. They just pay people, students, whoever, interns, to skirt some of the rules and stay away from hiring payroll. Just be careful with all of that stuff too. CRA is not stupid, and they want their money. And so when it comes to hiring people, be responsible, ask lots of questions, and if you can afford it, talk to a compensation lawyer, a payroll, an HR lawyer. So I think we covered most of this already, though. Income taxes, for the most part, with your startups and your ventures, you won't have to worry about income tax for the first couple of years, unfortunately. If you do, congratulations. It's a lot more simple because it's the end of the year. The filing deadline is April. Typically, the rules of thumb are if you pay yourself, if you work for yourself, then you have to remit your taxes by April. If you work for somebody else, it's June. And so that means if you're a company, it's June. If you're working for yourself, it's April. Income taxes are, there's Intuit, like QuickBooks Online, integrates with another piece of software called Profile. There's all sorts of online software that you can use, tax prep, to do it yourself. If you really want to take advantage of it, I'd spend a bit of money on a reasonably cheap income tax accountant. Even an H&R Block will do it for you, a reasonably good job. It'll help you know what's deductible and what's not. I think more importantly, at this point, at this stage in most startups, is going to be the input tax credits and the HST. Understand the value of them. The big value is like the shoebox, collecting on the receipts, knowing what portion is HST, because that way you know for sure when it comes time for you to file that HST filing with the CRA, you know how much they owe you, and you know you don't have to worry about if they come knocking, because they usually will within a 5-year period. You'll get a CRA audit. You have it there ready to go. And you're taking advantage by getting it back as quickly as possible. So at this point, would anybody like me to go deeper on input tax credits and HST? Yeah?
I wouldn't mind hearing a bit more about input tax credits. If there's any, I don't have a specific question.
Yeah. What about tax credits?
Input tax credits.
So that's really just a bit of a confusing name for HST. It's really just this concept of, I don't see any markers, but it's just this concept that you're collecting, right? You're collecting every time you charge HST, you're collecting on the money coming in, and you're paying out on the things that it takes, the inputs that it takes to run your business, whether or not it's on independent contractors, whether or not it's on inventory that you're buying, whether or not it's on your cell phone bill, whatever it is, you're paying money out, and in addition to the money for the service, they're charging you HST. So it's just the net difference between what you've put in and what you put out, what you've collected and what you paid.
And this is probably a really dumb question, but I don't know the answer to it. I was under the impression that there were different percentages that you're able to claim. Like, let's say I pay, so I pay a cell phone bill and I use the cell phone for business. There's only a certain percentage of that that you can write off. It depends.
It depends. And actually, you just reminded me, and I'm shocked that I didn't have it up there. I should have told you guys about this, so remind me afterwards. But it depends. If for example, you have a cell phone and you use it half the time for business and you use it half the time for your personal life, legitimately, you probably shouldn't be expensing the whole amount. Do most people do that? I think a lot of people use their business cell phones for personal things. So some of those things that are gray areas, if you want to be absolutely letter of the law, then yes, you should come up with some calculation of how much is used for personal reasons and how much is used for corporate.
But are you saying that the amount of tax that let's say I claim my entire cell phone for business, I effectively don't, that full amount of tax that I pay on that comes off of the tax that I pay? It's not a percentage of it?
No, all of it. The same percentage that the bill is a corporate expense. So if the 100% is a corporate expense, 100% of the tax.
Because I'm finding at the end of the year, I'm completely shocked and surprised by what my income tax return is.
Your income tax return or your sales tax? Your sales tax refund?
My sales tax refund.
Your sales tax refund. In a positive way, you mean you're actually getting a lot of money back?
Yeah, but I don't know how to, it seems confusing to me to actually be able to try to, I don't have a sense of it. I find it confusing.
Yeah, I think if you dial it back and get to a high level with it and simplify it, it's just, however, it's the difference between the amount of HST that I've collected and the amount that I've spent, right? And if you added up every receipt, there should be a line that says HST. The sum of all those goes against the sum that you've collected, and the difference, if you've overpaid, you get it back.
I actually didn't realize it was that simple.
Yeah. Now, one complication on that, and it's not that big of a complication, is meals and entertainment. And there's a lot. Like most startups that I do the books for have a lot of meals and entertainment. Starbucks, pizzas, drinks, like dinners out. A lot of people, it's the lifestyle, right? The people are willing to spend corporate money on the culture and keeping people happy, which is fantastic. Only 50% of that is refundable back to the company, regardless of how much you use. It's just a flat 50%. So you're only going to get 50% back on the sales tax, and you're only going to get you can only use 50% of it on your income taxes. Don't worry so much about the income tax part, because whoever's doing your taxes will tell you that. But when you're doing your HST filing, you're not going to get, and when you're just spending the money in the first place, keep in mind that you're only getting 50% of that back.
And is that because they're assuming that 50% of it you're spending on yourself?
That's right.
The idea of it?
That's right. That's the sort of.
Which is weird, because there might be situations where.
Totally. They just had to pick a number, right? And people take advantage of it. They know that, so that's the number that they came up with, all right? But, that being said, there's a lot of benefits to owning your own corporation, right? There's a lot of things like, all your gas money to and from clients, operating costs of your car if you use your car, operating costs of your computer, your home, your internet, your cell phone bill. There's a lot of ways that you can take advantage of these things. Transit passes, totally, yeah. If you're going to your client, right? You're not supposed to use it to commute to and from your workplace. Those types of costs are different, right? They're like anybody else, right? That gets up in the morning and has a salary job. You can't expense the cost of going to and from work.
So in that case, I would just have to estimate the portion of time that I'm traveling.
That's right.
Between.
That's right. That's right. Plus, you've also got that personal tax credit for transit passes anyway on your personal income, whether you guys know that or not, but should be taking advantage of that too. That was the one I wanted to remember to tell you, was the meal. It's called Meals and Entertainment, and you want to track that separately because you're only going to get 50% of that back. How does the CRA audit work? They come in. If anybody doesn't have much of an accounting background, the way an audit works is they'll come in. They'll say, okay, can we see your books and records? Let's see how you came up with this claim that you filed, because you'll go online to make the filing and you'll fill it in. Let's see how you came up with the revenue and how you came up with the expenses. And you'll say, well, here's my income statement for this period. They'll say, okay, let us drill down on this number of $100,000 of expenses. Let us drill down on it. What's it made up of? So you double click in this imaginary world, and you've got 5 line items. One of them's meals and entertainment. One of them's dues and subscriptions. One of them's hosting fees, etc. They'll click on all of them, and they'll cherry pick the big ones for the most part. They'll say, okay, give me those 3. Give me those 3. They'll drill down, go in those 3, and then give me the receipts for these ones. And to your point, or your point, they'll say, if you don't have the paper, you'll say, I have it here attached because I've gotten these nice clean records. It's attached to the transaction in my software, so we can just go right in here and look at it. They'll look at it. They'll say, yep, looks like you got it right. They tick it off. And most CRA field agents that come out, their job is, first and foremost, they're employees, right? They're out there to get their job done. They come out, they build a file. They're going to take that file back to their manager, and they're going to say, this is what I found at the job today. Can you sign off on it? I think everything's good. His manager's going to look at it. There's going to be a checklist. Did you do this? Did you do this? Did you get the right samples? Was there any exceptions? No, you're good. So if you're able to help that guy check the box, finish his job as fast as possible, make his life easy, he'll make your life easier. What happens is, if he goes and looks at one of the invoices, the transactions that he's picked from his sample, and it's wrong, he's going to have to get another sample. He'll say, okay. And some of the rules that they follow is, okay, if one's wrong, pick another 3. So all of a sudden, you start opening up that can of worms, and if you're bending the rules, or you're making mistakes, or you're sloppy, all of a sudden, then the guy's like, oh man, in order to get this file approved, now I got to go back, and I've got to look at all these things. And so that's when you get in trouble. So you get a little bit messy, or you skip a couple areas, and then all of a sudden, you've opened yourself up to more work and more time and more thorough analysis. Yep.
Is it a problem if your books aren't balanced, in the sense because Wave, for example, has deleted a lot of transactions, so it doesn't match the exact date for the actual...
For the bank statement?
Yeah.
Yeah, it does. It does matter. It's one of the most important, like the anchors of accounting, is that you have to reconcile. Now, that doesn't mean that your cash balance on your balance sheet on any particular date is going to match exactly to the bank statement, because there's timing items. There could be outstanding checks, right? There could be either going out or coming in. There could be unsettled credit card payments, but you have to account for those things. And so if you give someone a set of books and records and they don't tie in at all to your bank statement, because ultimately an audit includes going back to the source document, which is your bank statement, and being able to confirm that these things happened, then it'll put into question your books and records. Now, in reality, a lot of people don't have clean, balanced books and records, and so you can work with the person to make sure that they get what they want. That you follow your way through. But the best practice is, at least on a quarterly basis, or even just annual, before you do your filing, try to get yourself accurately balanced.
How would I fix it? Because it's only like all these few transactions are missing, right? So how would I balance it going forward? So that way
That's a bigger question that I can answer in this, but it's probably to sit down, get your bank statement on one hand, right? Try to balance in short periods. So let's just say you went from January 1st to December 31st. Start January 1st and start with your January. Don't try to do the whole year in one. Sit down and break it up. And even if you can't get that one statement for January 2015 balance, start with the first week of January. Like, look at what the balance was on the statement at the end of the first week, on January 7th. See if you can balance that. And then move in small chunks, and you'll find it.
So I have to go back. Can I just reset and start at 2016?
Well, you could throw Wave away. You totally can. You could throw your books and records away and just use your bank statements and start over. If you've got your receipts in your bank statements, you could do a shoebox, right? You just give it to an accountant and say, put this together for me. Or you could start over. Absolutely. Yeah. Just because you've started doing your bookkeeping and your accounting on a Wave or a QuickBooks or anything else, on a Ledger or whatever else, there's nothing that says that's your permanent books. You can restart anytime you want. Sure. Okay. Cleo, how are we doing for time? I don't know what we're good? Okay. 7 years, I think, is the answer on, even if it's digital, make sure you keep things for 7 years. And the CRA likes to say, a lot of people like to say, oh, you have to make sure that it's on Canadian soil and that the servers are located in Canada. The important thing from the CRA's perspective is that it can be recalled quickly. They don't want to hear, it's more for large corporations, okay, all of our stuff is stored, offshore somewhere, we've got to go get it. You've got to have it available. And so don't worry about where the servers are and everything else. Just make sure that you can find the documentation quickly and that it's backed up and safe. One of the things I like about a receipt bank and a QuickBooks Online is that you're storing it in a receipt bank, which is completely separate, or some other piece of software, completely separate from your accounting system. And then in your accounting system, it's getting published there as well. So you've got 2 copies of it, one in receipt bank and one in QuickBooks Online, if anything was to ever happen to one of them. Open a few separate bank accounts like we talked about. These are just some tips. Open one for your HST, open one for your US dollars, and open one for your Canadian. Little tip that, and I'm seeing this more now because so many people are buying software online from US companies, is I don't know if you noticed or not, but when you buy something on your credit card and you've got a Canadian credit card and you sign up for GoDaddy and you pay, it's a US cost, you pay the price that's on there in US dollars, but the credit card companies charge you a spread. So they'll exchange it for you. Let's say the exchange rate's 1.2 at that time. They'll charge you about 1.23. So they'll charge you about 3 extra percentage points to convert that. That's their spread. That's their fee for doing it. And so every time you're buying something on your Canadian credit card that's in the US, you're paying an extra surcharge for that you don't usually see. But you can do the math on it if you want and figure it out, but you'll see that the exchange rate you're paying is always a few percentage points higher than what the actual exchange rate is. So what a lot of companies are doing, and that's back to Maj's point, is they'll incorporate in the States so they get a US bank account just so that they can get a US dollar credit card. But if you have US funds coming in, keep them in US dollars as much as you can. So that and try to get a credit card on that bank account. That'll save you some money over time, especially as you grow. You'll be surprised at how much you're actually paying. The other is, whether you notice or not, when you are collecting money from your customers on PayPal, on any credit card, you're paying on average 2 to 3%. Amex is the most expensive, and Visa and MasterCard are about the same, 2.25 to 3%. So if you have a business and you have a high ticket item, but people are paying you $1,000 per invoice, you're losing $30, $25, $30 every time you get paid on credit cards. Now the benefit is that you're getting your money right away. So, make sense?
People pay you on a credit card?
When people pay you on a credit card,
You lose money?
you lose money. Yeah, you pay. That's the cost to having Visa or MasterCard collect your money for you, and that's it right there. So in my business, for example, I collect all my fees through direct debit. So I use an online company called Rotessa. There's another fantastic Toronto startup out there called Pluto Payments, Plooto. These guys are awesome, and they're doing a lot of stuff in terms of bringing the cost of payment processing down, paying in the US, paying across Canada. And it integrates with QuickBooks Online. It's fantastic. Rotessa is another one I use. I pull money directly out of I have a pre-authorized agreement. They fill it out online. It's nice and simple. And I pull the money automatically out of my clients' bank accounts on a monthly basis in advance. I mean, if you can build your model about getting your money in advance and getting it without paying credit card fees, you're a step ahead. There's no risk to collection, no fees, and you're able to pay the people that are doing the work for you. Yeah, it's talking about being lean again. I mean, just be cheap, be lean, pay attention. Every dollar matters. Know why you're doing it. This is more like, I guess I'm just being a bit of an old guy, just giving advice on this one, but like, when you're going into a startup, it's easier when you're young and you might not be married and you don't have kids and stuff yet, but make sure you're honest. The the rule of thumb I like to live by is that there's a lot of people that, I mean, we should all be honest and we should all not lie to other people, but there's certain people you absolutely don't want to be, that you want to be honest with and not lie to. Your lawyers, your accountants, your life partner. Tell them what's going on in your startup, complain to them, let them know what you're doing before you're getting into this, because they're going to be going through it with you, and they're a great person to lean on, great person to run it with. So be really honest about that stuff, and then yourself. And I think yourself's an important one because, you know, I don't know what, the stats are ridiculous about how many of these fail. You've got to be ready for that, and you've got to take the learnings from it. You know, like I said, I took my money out of my home equity. If I hadn't been honest with my wife about that, it's not just the cost either, it's opportunity cost, right? When you're 35 to 45 or 40 to 50, these are some of your key earning years. If you're taking those off and going after an idea that you have, there's a big opportunity cost there. For you guys to be doing it at your age now, you might not be going to work at a bank, or you might not be going to work for a law firm, you might not be going to work for Google or Shopify or whoever. You're going out on your own. So there's an opportunity cost to that, right? There's a ton of value, I think, because you're going to learn about innovation and you're going to learn about what startups are doing, and I think you'll get the benefit from that. But be honest with yourself about why you're doing it. Why are you doing it? Are you doing it to get rich? Then make sure you're doing something that's going to make you rich. Are you doing it because you just want the culture? Make sure you know that. Like, really sort of do an inventory on your own goals and objectives when you're going into this. Okay, so this is just a summary, what we learned. So about this father's accountant, I think the reason that this came up was Matt from Intuit, who runs the apps and stuff. He was encouraging me to come here. You know, he's talking about my business being scalability isn't your father's accounting firm, and it's not. And we're not even accounting. We're bookkeeping. We're back office. We're outsourced support. And we're all about online invoicing, billing, making things as lean and quick and integrated as possible. Digital documentation. I go in and turn most people's businesses into 60-70% paperless just by getting rid of invoices, bills, checks, things like that. Most of my businesses don't use checks anymore. Teaching people how to collaborate. So if you're on an online business, if you have online accounting, receipt bank, online invoicing software, all of your, not all, but the people that you want within your business can use it. They can share it, they can access it from anywhere. It travels with you, you can use it on your phone and your tablet, whatever. So it allows people to collaborate from different places and share the information. It allows you to integrate. I mean, we're just starting to see the benefits of having the hub of your back office, which is your bookkeeping, your invoicing, your accounts payable, accounts receivable online, because now you're starting to be able to use some of this payment software that's coming out. You can integrate it to your bank account. You can print checks. You can do beautiful invoicing. There's collection software out there. There's business plan software. There's business analytics that you can use. All of these things aren't possible if you are separated from the world using desktop software, or if you're using a shoebox or using spreadsheets or anything else. Support. It's much easier to, if you're online and you have a recognized piece of software, it's a lot easier to find a network of support out there, whether it's from a company like mine or anywhere. You could just go on to something like Fiverr's or Elance, which I think has changed its name. Odesk and Elance have changed their name. But there's so many people out there that, and then they could you can give them an ID and create a username for them, and they can access your stuff and solve it for. Does anybody not know what Fiverr's is? You ever heard of Fiverr? You can go online and just type Fiverr.com. Just about anything that you need for your business, you can get it done for $5 or $10. It's unbelievable what's out there and available for people. There's people all over the world that are doing the work for you. Like my logo was from Fiverr. I've had people do some reconciliation work for me from Fiverr. It's amazing. And that's sort of this whole concept of the more online you are, the more open you are, like you have the ability to invite more people from different places to do the work with and for you. And then just preparation, your ability to scale. That's what I'm saying back to your point about Wave, like, or not just Wave, but anything. Set yourself up. If you really are going into this to grow, then you should really be willing to prepare yourself for that growth. If you're really just going into this because you want to have a startup and you're not worrying about setting yourself up and building the foundation for growth later on, then you got to ask yourself if you actually believe in your success. Because the more that you build that foundation now and you're organized and ready for that growth, the easier it's going to be. Yeah, I think that's basically all the slides I had. I think Q&A was the last one, but we did a good job of yeah. Fiverr, Fiverr, based on the $5 concept. Now, I think you can pay more. That's an intro level, but there's some pretty cool stuff on there. Get it? Thanks.